Hey, so as you all may very well know, the Oscars are today. Um, and yeah, I've been wanting to make new content for this channel for a while. I didn't know exactly what to do, but I figured I made a video about the previous Oscars because it's always kind of fun to like rank stuff and just it gives you the opportunity to talk about a bunch of movies and maybe uh, some people are also kind of interested in the sort of gamified aspect of it. Um, but yeah, I figured why the hell not? I should just try to make a sort of tier list at first. But then I started thinking about how weird it is to make a tier list in this case because in this for this these particular Oscars, the whole catalog of movies, I guess you could call it, is actually pretty solid. So it's kind of, I don't know, boring to make a tier list with only like S tier, A tier, and B tier movies. Because that's essentially what I feel about pretty much all of these movies. Alright, so I'll go one by one from uh, place number 10 all the way to number 1. And for number 10, I think I gotta go with Elvis. I thought it was a really good movie. I actually enjoyed it. I'm not like a huge Baz Luhrmann fan, or an Elvis fan for that matter. Um, Not that I dislike Elvis or anything. It's just that I just never had that much interest in the subject matter. But it was actually pretty well made. The only thing I think this movie really has going against it is the fact that it structurally, in terms of narrative, it's pretty much like you've seen this movie. It's every musical biopic you've ever seen. Um, the good thing that it has going for it is the direction, and the editing, because that's absolutely insane. This movie feels like it's on fucking speed, and yeah. But sadly, the script and all of that stuff is enough of a detriment to hold it back. And compared to all of these other movies, I think it really sort of has a weak spot in that area. But the music is great. Austin Butler, amazing performance. I'd say I'm not sure if he's gonna win, but I'd say he deserves the nomination at least for Best Actor. And yeah, I thought this was a very enjoyable watch, but sadly the script is kind of just meh. So I'm just gonna fucking pull it all the way here. And to be honest, for the next 3 spots, I'm kind of feeling like all of the movies that I'm gonna pick are sort of on the same level. But if I had to make a choice, I think I'd go with All Quiet on the Western Front. I thought it was a really good movie. It was, I can't say enjoyable really because it's pretty horrific. But technically, it's amazing. The screenplay is also pretty good. Well, obviously, it's based on the book, which is a classic. But I'd have to say that performances and all that, of course, it's really well done. So it's doing really well on all of the fundamentals, but there's sort of an issue with it in terms of how it represents the First World War. If I have to go into sort of spoilers, but namely with the ending. I haven't actually read All Quiet on the Western Front, but I did a bit of digging after seeing this movie, and I saw a lot of people were sort of complaining about the fact that the ending was changed to sort of represent this over-the-top message, sort of to like drive the point home that war is absolutely horrific, because even when they were losing the war that they went out on this like last ditch effort to, I don't know, do something. But apparently this is not only completely against the ending of the book, but also completely historically inaccurate, because by that point in the war, if any general had recommended something like that, according to what I've read from certain historians, like no one would have paid attention to them. No one would have made these soldiers go and fight like they did. It's not like just one person can go ahead and decide for all of them. So yeah, I think that sort of puts it on that spot a bit above Elvis, because I think it has some really good moments and it sort of deals in nuance a little bit better than this movie, but still I think it's held back by those parts, and also all the parts with like Daniel Bruhl and the negotiation. While sort of necessary to understand the context, I feel like it ultimately didn't do much for me. But overall, it's a good watch. I would recommend it. Now for the 8th place, I think I have to go with Women Talking. I like this movie, once again, like all of the movies here, but I did feel like it was sort of like watching a play. I know it's not an adaptation of a play, it's an adaptation of a novel, and something that's pretty much based in real events that took place. But I do think that it sort of relies a little bit too much on the conversational aspect. It doesn't sort of nail that 12 Angry Men, so like contained location style for me. I think the main strength of this movie is the performances, which are like absolutely amazing. I'm honestly like astonished at how not one performance from this movie is nominated for a best actress. It's just kind of crazy to me. Like Rooney Mara, Claire Foy, I feel like they and many others could have been easily nominated. But yeah, and I did feel like the ending is a little bit drawn out, maybe. I'd say it's an important watch. It gives you a lot to think about. But ultimately, it's not something that's that I would consider, at the very least, I wouldn't consider it to be better than a lot of these other movies here. All right, now for the 7th spot, place, whatever you want to call it, I think Avatar. Listen, I really liked Avatar. I was rooting for it all the fucking time. I like James Cameron. I liked Avatar 1. Sure, it's Pocahontas reskinned with blue people, but I really don't care. I think the world building is excellent in this movie, in these movies now. I was honestly worried a bit at first when I heard that it would be like a family story, and that they would have kids, and that they would like sort of be moving to another place. And like I felt like normally when you try to inject that much in terms of new stuff to a franchise like Star Wars, for instance, it kind of falls apart. But I actually didn't feel that way with this movie. I thought it was really well done. The performances were really great. I was also kind of surprised by the fact that I liked the how the story follows the kids. I actually kind of liked them more than the parents. And especially the fact that it has a really great villain with Quaritch. I want to see more of that character in the following movies. It's probably one of the more interesting characters I've seen in like a sci-fi movie or franchise in a while, actually. And it's pretty original in how he actually, if you've seen the first Avatar, he dies in the first one, but they bring him back in a pretty novel way, I think. And with a really cool story to tell too about family and fatherhood, and it actually kind of made me not cry, but tear up a little bit. So yeah, I think it deserves spot number 7. Okay, so for the 6th place, I'm going with Top Gun Maverick. I really like this movie. I didn't expect much when I saw that it was coming out, but I saw it start getting some pretty good reviews. So I said, what the hell? I went and checked it out. I had never seen Top Gun, but I watched it on the same day I was going to watch this movie. Wasn't that impressed. I like Tony Scott, but it was all right. It was pretty 80s, but this movie really blew it out of the water as a sequel. I think Tom Cruise is pretty great in it. I think Miles Teller is pretty great in it. I think the supporting cast, Glenn Powell, is really good too. I think the only reason I'm not putting it higher is the fact that it still kind of falls within the trappings of how it initially started as an action movie. And I'm not saying that in the sense that like action movies don't deserve to win Oscars, because like Lord knows I wanted Mad Max: The Fury Road to win the Oscar when it was nominated. I did feel like it was the best movie that year. But here it's still kind of like falls back on the original Top Gun's formula a bit, relies a bit too heavily on nostalgia, and yeah, the whole like nameless bad guys thing. Well, it's cool how they try to give them some sort of character, and they didn't just stop at like bad guy number 1 and bad guy number 2. They kind of tried to inject some like competence in them, at least through their actions. I still feel like maybe a little bit of balls in terms of I don't know, just specifying who maybe they're fighting against, or maybe that's just I don't know, a sort of a tiny pet peeve of mine. And also the whole love story thing, it was sweet, but you know, I think some things could have maybe been done a little bit better. They're really nitpicks, but compared to some of the other movies, I think it falls a little bit short in those aspects. But still, we're talking about the cream of the crop here, and all these movies are pretty great. Okay, for the 5th spot, I'm gonna go with Triangle of Sadness. Yeah, this movie is really wild. I had never seen a Ruben Östlund movie before. I was familiar with The Square, and I've seen some scenes from that movie, but I didn't really know how this would go. I think the best way to describe it is sort of like it's sort of like a Luis Buñuel type of satire, but with the difference that Ruben Östlund seems to kind of like the rich a little bit more than Luis Buñuel did, or at least he sympathizes with them a little bit more. I think, funnily enough, maybe the overall structure and like pacing of this movie isn't as solid as the 2 previous movies, but the highs are way higher than the ones in these other movies. And particularly the whole like slow ramping up of issues and problems that start going on in the ship, and the slow buildup of that dichotomy between the poor and the rich. While it's like it's not a new story. Like class struggle is it's not the most novel concept. I do think that they sort of just threw some characters onto a boat and said, listen, what if this and this and this starts to happen? How would these people react afterwards? Um, and yeah, I think they turned out something that's pretty interesting and that I think has a lot to say, even if you may agree or disagree with it. But I really like movies that have the balls to like sort of spark a conversation of some type, and I think this movie does it really well. And I'm also like a big Harold Dickinson fan. I think he's a really good actor, and yeah, I just really appreciate this movie on a weird sort of level, while also acknowledging that it isn't like perfect. But I'll give it the 5th spot. Now for the 4th spot, I'm picking The Fabelmans. It's not Spielberg's best movie. It's not the best movie of the last year, but it's so deeply heartfelt, and as someone that sort of feels similarly to the main character, it very easily like got to me in certain ways. It's hard to make me like sort of family dramas that are about also like a sort of coming of age. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of those types of movies. I do feel like they tend to fall into a sort of structure a bit, and I do think that this movie has some of those trappings too, like specifically when Sammy goes to the other high school, and it kind of like falls into these sort of teen movie things that don't sort of mesh particularly well with other aspects of the movie. But there is something really magical about it, about the love it has for cinema, for creation, and particularly, I think Spielberg with this movie, he really gets at the root of what makes people who love movies. And the final scene of this movie is probably, it's maybe top 3 of my favorite scenes of movies from the last year, or maybe top 10 of the last decade. Yeah, it's really, really, really special. I don't want to spoil it in case anyone actually wants to watch it, but it also, the fact that it involves one of my like favorite people. So yeah, I think it easily deserves the 4th spot. Okay, now we're getting into the best of the best, the cream of the crop of the cream of the crop. Yeah, I think I'm going with Tar for the 3rd place. Tar is a really, really unique movie. It sort of escapes categorization. I was about to say that it reminded me a lot of Whiplash, but that's just mostly in terms of the world that it takes place in. Aside from that, it's very unique. It's almost like entirely its own thing. Sort of like a biopic about a fictional character that is so well constructed that you believe that they're real, and especially given how how relevant the conversation around this character is. But it's also weirdly, it doesn't tie itself to that sort of like notion of trying to appear real, but it also like has no issue diving headfirst into sort of mystical and weird spiritual aspects, And even some really, I don't know if I would say fourth wall breaking stuff, but it's really hilarious too. It's weirdly hilarious in a way that it sort of winks at you and it doesn't. I think this movie also has probably one of the best endings of any movie from last year. And yeah, I just think Cate Blanchett probably deserves the Oscar. I think it might go to Michelle Yeoh. They both deserve it, but I think Cate Blanchett just did a really wonderful job. Like you don't see Cate Blanchett in this movie. You see the conductor Tar. So yeah, I think this goes in number 3. I think for second place, it goes to Everything Everywhere All at Once. Super original movie. I can sort of see and sympathize with some of the people and some of the discourse that thinks that the Daniels' style is a little bit annoying. I saw Swiss Army Man. It's a good movie, but it does have those sort of aspects that it seems sort of like I'm watching maybe not an SNL skit, but something that's like trying too hard to be funny when something could easily be just heartfelt and you could keep it at that. But this movie, I think it just really, it dialed in on all of its influences. It borrowed exactly when it had to. It was super creative, super innovative. Just the whole concept of how people sort of jump from multiverse, from universe to universe, and well, actually they don't jump, but they like sort of let's say absorb characteristics of themselves from other universes. These just nods to The Matrix and to like Wong Kar-wai movies like In the Mood for Love. A lot of completely disparate stuff that you could never imagine combining into one like solid piece of work, but here it is, and it's actually really great, and it's an action movie, and it has really great fight scenes, and I would be happy if this won the Oscar. If I had to like really nitpick this movie, I think that maybe it's a little bit overly long, and that some of the humor, like, also it kind of like could have dialed down a bit, especially during the more emotional scenes. And I did feel like some of the scenes kind of like repeated themselves, or dragged on a bit too long, more towards the end. But I do sort of also feel like it's an epic of sorts. It's a weird epic that is kind of contained in one location, oddly enough, but it is an epic in nature and in scope, and like with how it treats time. And I think that just makes it deserve to be, well, one of the best movies of the last year. So yeah, I'm placing it at number 2 on this list. And for number 1, obviously, the only movie that's left, The Banshees of Inisherin. I'm a huge Martin McDonagh fan. I think In Bruges is probably one of my favorite movies ever. It has a perfect screenplay, and I think Banshees of Inisherin is pretty much on the same level. I'd have to like go into a whole other analysis in my brain of which movie I prefer, if like In Bruges or Banshees of Inisherin. But the fact that you have Colin Farrell with Brendan Gleeson, they have absolutely remarkable chemistry together, even in a movie that's about them like falling apart or distancing themselves. The way they transmit all of these subtle emotions, and just the simple nature of the story, with it being about a friendship that sort of stops existing, and how that encompasses so many things about how we view our lives and how we want to treat our time on this earth, if we're going to enjoy the simple things, or if we're going to let's say go after more lofty pursuits. It puts all of these things into direct confrontation, and then you have the amazing supporting cast with Carrie Condon and Barry Keoghan, and even the lady who played the sort of witch, I guess you could call her. It's not a witch. It's not a spoiler or anything, but yeah, I think this movie is just, it's maybe of a much more simple nature than a lot of the movies on this list. Maybe even more simple than all of them, I would say, but it has something that is so genuine, I think, and it cements Colin Farrell as a really great actor. So yeah, I think this deserves to go into the top spot, because I really don't think it falls short in any department. So yeah, let me put this really big. So yeah, that's all. I ranked all these movies. If I had to throw in an honorable mention, it would be After Sun. I honestly feel like that's my favorite movie from last year. I think it's a shame that it wasn't nominated for any Oscars, because it's, I even kind of feel like it's a little better than Banshees of Inisherin, honestly. It's a really remarkable movie, but I might just like make another video about it if I really want to. That's my list. Hope you liked it or whatever, and throw your suggestions or ideas or whatever in the comments if you think I'm completely wrong and I should shut the hell up. You can go ahead and do that. So bye.